Hello everyone and welcome to this quick little guide that we're going to do. We're going to talk about soloing. It's more of a little tips video this is. So this is my tips for soloing, whether it be soloing the old HM Flashpoints, soloing Heroic 4s, or just generally soloing I guess. But we'll talk about soloing mostly in regards to the level 50 HM Flashpoints, because quite a few people have been messaging me saying they've been having trouble with quite a few Flashpoints and quite a few classes and quite a few different bosses. So this is just going to be more of a general guide. We may look in more detail later on at specific classes and what they can do to get around specific mechanics, but we will, for this, is just a general guide. The first thing I would suggest to you is to read up on the fight mechanics. Knowing the fight mechanics for each boss is a huge benefit, because you know when the big damage is about to come. You know, knowing what things do, knowing what the big damage is about to come, you can either, you know, avoid the damage or at least pop a defensive cooldown. So that's probably the top thing that you gotta do, is research those bosses. Now I will do guides on the bosses that I do. I tend to talk about what's going to happen and what you're going to need to do. But again, the general rule is respect the mechanics, really. A few instances we can ignore mechanics if we have, you know, particularly high DPS. The other thing we are going to mention is your companion. Now, since patch 3.0.2 has dropped, you can gear out your companion in a full set of 192 gear. To get this, all you have to do is head to Yavin and complete the weekly quest. It's the weekly quest that is to complete 8 daily quests, basically. So do all the dailies on Yavin. You could do Revan if you want a main hand as well. You could do She Who Greedily Devours. I can never remember what that quest is called. I can't remember. I know you fight She Who Greedily Devours on Rishi, and it's got a little quest chain and it drops an offhand, so you can get a full set of 192 gear for your companion, basically just by doing dailies. So that is pretty nice. It's pretty nice that they've added that. Again, that 192 gear, some people complain it's not well optimized, but hey, it's going to be good enough for soloing level 50 HMs. As for the companion you should choose, the companion you should choose for these flashpoints, I would suggest going with a DPS companion, unless you know you're going to take damage. Now there are certain situations where it may be more beneficial to have a tank companion. For example, if you're a scrapper scoundrel, it may be more beneficial because you get more backblasts in, to have a companion who holds aggro for you. Again, pick the one that complements your class well. If you're dying a lot, pick a healer. Generally, healers shouldn't be necessary though. You should be able to do it with a DPS companion. Most of the time I've been able to do it with a DPS companion, particularly if you're a class that heals, if you have off-spec healing. Even classes like the Shadow, I'm doing this footage as the Shadow, and I have a few self-heals as well. So we have a few self-heals as the Shadow, and we also have Resilience, which can mitigate some nice damage for us. Again, I would suggest if you're a tank or a healer, respec to DPS would be my suggestion. Change your discipline for one of the DPS disciplines. It's just going to be better for you, especially if you're hitting in rage. The big problem is, are you hitting in rage, you know, all the time? Then you need more damage. Are you getting hit too hard? Then you need more mitigation, or you need to look at what you can do to avoid taking damage, is the thing. So it depends on what's killing you. You should look at what you died with, and you should pay attention to incoming damage, because most of these fights, to be honest, aren't really a DPS race. They are more about avoiding incoming damage, really, than anything else. If you can survive in these fights, it's great. I mean, I always tend to solo with the stealth class just because it's quicker. I just find it quicker just to skip the trash. Most classes should be able to do it at level 60. Someone was saying they're having trouble with the Vanguard. I'm gonna level the Vanguard. I'm started leveling my Vanguard now, and we'll have a little look at the Vanguard. I'm a Vanguard tank, so we'll have a little look at it as a tank, really. And I'm using Alara as a companion for leveling right now, which isn't very good actually, because you're having a tank with a healer companion. I mean, you never die, but you know, we'll try soloing a few of these HMs with a Vanguard and see how well they do. But generally, the problem is usually either DPS or survival. If the problem is DPS, you know, don't forget to use things like stims, things like adrenals that buff DPS. Most of the fights shouldn't be a huge issue for DPS though. Again, if you are a tank spec, respecking to DPS will give you more damage. Keep your tank gear, but go DPS because it's going to be an improvement, because the specs are focused around giving you more damaging abilities rather than the tank spec, which is focused around giving you more defensive abilities. That's just a general thing. Same with the healer, I would just go DPS. My Merc is a healer and I just respec to DPS whenever I do these soloing, and I have no problems with it, to be honest with you. I did Lost Island, I've done quite a few solo now. I'm doing Maelstrom Prison in this video. I'm running through Maelstrom Prison with my Shadow, but again, I would suggest respecting the mechanics or knowing what's going to happen is the key to success, because some bosses are less than straightforward. Bosses like Malgus have things that apparently I did read somewhere that you can resist unlimited power now, which is a shame. It's actually kind of sad, really, that you can resist certain things. Certain attacks cannot be resisted. Currently, some of those bosses do have some of those attacks in HM. I would consider that. So our goal eventually is to go and solo the level 55 tacticals, and then eventually go on to solo the level 55 HMs. I'm probably not going to be doing that at least until 198 gear. I probably won't even attempt it until 198 gear, just because it is going to be such a pain. But yeah, I mean, it depends on certain classes do find it easier to solo than others. The best class for soloing is probably the Sage, to be honest with you. The Sage has, you know, self heals, very good defensive cooldowns, and decent damage output. So these are the kind of things that you want for soloing. So the Sage is probably the ultimate class. Shadow is not too bad. The Merc ain't too bad either. The Marauder apparently is decent. It used to always be the Shadow tank that used to be the best at soloing, because you had things like, you had very good damage output and you had self heals back then, way back then. So Shadow tanks could solo level 50 HMs at level 50. I've seen a few videos of Shadow tanks doing that, and they were the first ones to be able to solo it, really. But again, I would go with the Sage as the ultimate kind of soloing class, but most classes should be able to do these bosses. Lost Island is the one that's going to cause you most problems, particularly if you're a class that can't heal, and particularly if your companion gets knocked off on the third boss. It's that third boss that's going to cause the problems, really. I had a few problems on that. That is where you're going to hit most of your issues again. But again, if you're soloing the HMs, they're pretty decent. I think they're worthwhile soloing. Some of them you get mounts, some of them you get some good credits and good basic comms, and they're fairly quick and they're fairly easy to do. So I like soloing them. And again, if you're doing the HK 40, the HK 51, should I say, quest, you're going to have to solo at least 2 of the HMs. It's going to be Maelstrom Prison if you're a Republic player. It's going to be Foundry if you're an Empire player in HM. You can do False Emperor normal. False Emperor normal will not cause you any problems to kill HK 47 and get the part. So again, if you want HK 51, you're going to have to solo. Generally solo, we say you have to solo because it's difficult to find groups for these, and you don't really need to find groups for these at level 60. You can solo them, that's the good thing about this. But again, we will do Maelstrom Prison. I'll do the whole guide for Maelstrom Prison, and I will also do Foundry. Foundry is going to be quite interesting to see if we can kill HK 47 in the Foundry. That's the hardest boss there. Revan ain't so hard in Foundry. Revan is a pushover, to be honest with you. He kind of was a joke, really. He was never that hard a boss, really, in the Foundry. So we'll talk about that when we get to that. So that is all for this video. So thank you for joining me. Again, hopefully a few of these tips will help you out. Again, get a companion that's well geared, get a good DPS companion, or just get Treek who can tank and heal. There you go. You're never going to get threat. You could use Treek after all, or HK 51 as well. Pretty decent companion for soloing. So that is all for this video. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you again soon, and goodbye.
I don't deserve this. There was so much left to conquer.